Peace and blessings. Welcome back to the channel once again, where we talk all things health and healing from a holistic perspective. And today will be no different. Today, we're going to talk about the top 8 warning signs of a stroke. Now, this is hugely important because, as we know, strokes, heart attacks are one of the leading killers of all human beings. But what I want to do first is give you a few statistics. 795,000 people have strokes annually. That's almost a stroke every 40 seconds, okay? And 40% of stroke deaths, those who actually die of a stroke, are males, which means that 60% are females. So this greatly affects females as compared to men. 85% of strokes are actually caused by a blood clot. Okay, now this is a huge thing. Now I'll have to create a whole separate video for that. But 85% of strokes are actually caused by a blood clot. Hugely important. And then this is the big number that is really important. Only 10% of people, 10% of people actually fully recover after a stroke. Now that's hugely important because, as I mentioned before, almost 800,000 people are affected by strokes every year, which means that only 8,000 of them will fully recover from it. And we all know that when people go through strokes, they can lose brain function, they can lose function, a part of their motor function. So their arms, their face will droop. It is a huge issue. Parts of their brain can greatly be affected, which we will talk about in just a second as well too. And if it affects a certain part of the brain, I mean, you could lose function of entire parts of your body, in most cases an entire side of your body, okay, left or right, because it's usually unilateral instead of bilateral. Okay, so this is the huge issue, especially in the Black and brown community as well, because unfortunately, due to a lot of lifestyle factors that we'll talk about in a second. But before we do that, let's first understand what is a stroke. A stroke is when the brain becomes deprived of oxygen, okay? Oxygen is the number one nutrient in life. Not vitamins, not minerals, not amino acids or proteins, not fats, not carbohydrates. The number one nutrient in life is oxygen. And our brain shows us that very quickly, because 10 seconds or more without oxygen, we will pass out, okay? Now you gotta understand, one of the primary things that the blood is delivering to every cell and tissue in the body is oxygen. This is why blood is constantly flowing in the body. So when the blood flow stops or slows down, then now you have an issue in terms of like getting this number one nutrient to every cell in the body, in particular in this case, the brain, okay? So blood flow is hugely important. And this is why we have to understand in life, our inner flow is always equal to our outer flow in life, okay? If we're flowing in our outer life, we're moving. We're flowing in our outer life in terms of with the type of foods that we're putting in our bodies, and et cetera, and so on, then it will increase the flow in our bodies. And it's so important, even when you think about stress, okay? Stress is resistance, okay? A resistance to flow. So when you're stressing, you're getting stuck, okay? So it's hugely important to understand that the blood is the river of life. It is literally delivering all the nutrients you need to your tissues, and particularly in this case, your brain. And oxygen is by far the number one nutrient, because again, without oxygen to the tissues in the brain for 10 seconds, you pass out. 4 to 6 minutes without oxygen, and you have permanent damage, permanent brain damage. This is like when somebody's drowning, okay? So it's hugely important to understand that the flow of life, when it stops, you stroke, okay? And particularly this is happening in the brain when there's a sort of a resistance, or the brain becomes deprived of oxygen. Okay. Now, the other thing about strokes is there's 2 different types of strokes. There's ischemic, and ischemic is when there's a blood clot or a blockage that is causing the stroke. That blood clot or blockage, the blockage could be due to plaque, that buildup of plaque that is narrowing the blood vessels. And ischemic strokes are around about 87% of all the strokes that we have, okay? And in terms of a death rate, 3% of people typically die with an ischemic stroke, okay? Now, on the counterpart to that is hemorrhagic stroke, okay? You know, hemorrhagic stroke is when the blood vessels burst, causing the blood to leak out in and around the brain tissues, okay? This decreases the flow of blood because you got to think about now this vessel that was carrying, you know, the blood to all parts of the body. Now the chain link has been broken. So as it becomes broken, not only do you have the issue of now you're not getting that oxygen, the nutrients to other parts of the brain, you also have an issue where now the river of life, the blood, you know, is now being exposed to toxins as well too. Okay. This also can increase the amount of pressure in the brain as well too. All right. And again, it's really important to understand that when you think about hemorrhagic versus ischemic, this hemorrhagic stroke, 50% of people die when they have a hemorrhagic stroke. So this is far more dangerous as compared to 3% with the ischemic. Okay. There is another type of stroke. Okay. And this type of stroke can last anywhere from 5 minutes or less, and then it goes away. This is called a TIA, okay, a transient ischemic attack, or maybe a mini stroke or a warning stroke, okay? But this TIA will typically happen less than 5 minutes, but there's typically not a lot of damage caused by it. So it literally is like a warning sign. So sometimes when people they have these TIAs, they overlook it because it happens for less than 5 minutes. It can happen over the span of a minute and then goes away and you think that you're fine. But it's really important to understand as I go through some of these warning signs of stroke, these 8 warning signs of stroke, it's important you know and understand that a TIA is a warning sign that a major stroke is coming, and it will come. And in most cases, it will either come in hours, and sometimes it could take days, but it is a warning sign. So when it does happen, you see some of these signs and symptoms, this is just a warning sign, okay? You got to get medical attention, all right? You have to understand. I'm going to go into some of these risk factors that are causing this stroke in many cases. And the reason why I'm bringing out the risk factors is because you can't change these risk factors like this, okay? You can't change the consequences of these risk factors in many cases. And let me give you a few examples. Okay, so for instance, a blood disorder, okay? A blood disorder like lupus or sickle cell anemia, okay, where the blood cell literally sickles or concaves in on itself, okay? That's not something you could change in an instant. So this is why I tell people a lot of times, 99% of everything I use in my health is going to be natural and holistic. But if I step off the curb and get hit by a bus or a car, please take me to the hospital, okay? If, you know, I get a cut on this arm, okay, take me to the hospital, you know? And so this is where modern medicine is actually useful in the acute emergency setting, okay? So the reason why I'm bringing that up is because when you have a blood disorder like a lupus or a sickle cell, this isn't something that's going to reverse itself in a day. So if you have a stroke as a result of your increased risk as a result of having this condition, you need medical attention, okay? High blood pressure, one of the number one risk factors to a stroke, and also, you know, called the silent assassin, is also a risk factor as well too. And we know how many people have high blood pressure. Birth control actually increases your risk as well too, because as we know, birth control can actually increase your risk for clots as well too. Blood thinners also, because they can make the blood so thin that at some point it can reduce the flow of blood as well too. All right, so it's really important for that reason. Unhealthy lifestyle, you know, an unhealthy lifestyle as well is also a risk factor. Smoking, okay, increases your risk for stroke. Alcohol, bad diet, stress, diabetes, of course, sedentary lifestyle. These are all things that increase your risk. Now, I'll create a whole separate another video where I'll go into details about these so I can help you along that journey as it relates to these particular lifestyle changes that need to be made. But it's important to know and understand that when I give you these signs and symptoms, or really signs of a stroke or impending stroke, it's important that you have to listen to them, and then you have to make changes afterwards. As I said before, only 10% of people, only 10% of people fully recover from strokes. Okay, that's a very small number considering the impact that stroke can have on your life. One side of your face could droop. One side of your whole entire body could be paralyzed. I can go on and on. Now, you can have cognitive dysfunction, okay? You can have slurred speech for the rest of your life. So it's so important we know and understand that prevention in the lifestyle changes is absolutely key, but also it's important to know that there are signs that are telling you that it is impending, that it is coming. Okay, and we're going to get into those right now. Okay, sign number one. Sign number one: sudden confusion, trouble speaking, or slurred baby talk. Okay, you'll notice that all of a sudden you're talking to somebody and now they got confusion, trouble speaking. They're kind of like mumbo jumbo, Google Gaga type of words, and you don't understand what they're saying. That could be a sign that a stroke is happening. And it's important to know and understand that that could happen for 2 or 3 minutes. And then you're like asking, hey, what's going on? What's going on? Why are you talking like that? You can go back and forth for a minute, and then minute 4 or 5, they come out of it and they're able to speak correctly. And you're thinking like, oh, I thought you were drunk for a second. Okay, you were talking crazy. And they'll say, I don't remember that. I don't know what was going on. I was kind of out of it. And you pacify it. So it's so important to know that that could be a sign of a stroke. Okay. Number two, sudden blindness or blurriness in either one or both eyes. So you'll notice that in either one eye, you'll be barely able to see, or sometimes it'll be complete blurriness in your vision. Okay. That's another sign and particular sign of a stroke as well too. Number three, dizziness. Okay. Dizziness, loss of coordination in your balance, also trouble with walking, um, tingling as well too. That also could be. Okay. So when you're starting to notice that all of a sudden you lose your balance or you feel dizzy, have trouble walking when you didn't work out, there was no issues before, and all of a sudden you're having issues, that could be a sign that you possibly are about to have a stroke or having a stroke. Okay. Number four, numbness or weakness. Okay. Numbness or weakness or paralysis in the face, in the arms, or in the legs. And it's usually unilateral on one side of the body or the other. It's usually not on both sides of the body. So it being on one side of the body, the face droop. Okay. The arm that can't move all of a sudden. Your legs one of your legs get really numb, a lot of tingling going on, weakness, all of these, especially when it's on one side, this could be a sign that there's a stroke. And the reason why I'm saying, I want to rewind back for a second. The reason why it's usually happening on one side of the body and not both is because when you have a stroke, you're having a stroke in a particular area of the brain. And although we look at the brain as one, it's actually separated into two hemispheres. Okay. So the blood flow on one side of the brain becomes blocked because of a clot, because of plaque, whatever. And that particular area of the brain is affected. And that area, that when you're affecting one side of the brain, you're going to affect one side of the body. Okay. So that's why one eye may be blurred and the other eye may not be blurred. That's why one arm may not be able to raise, or one side of the face will droop and the other side will be just fine. okay? Because it's happening on one side of the brain. The other thing that's really important is that wherever it happens on that part of the brain, it is going to affect those abilities in that area of the brain too. So it could be your face, it could be your your ability to think. It could be in the frontal lobe and affect, you emotionally as well too. So that's really important. So I wanted to bring that up really quick. But numbness, weakness on the arms, face, and leg, usually on one side of the body. Okay. Number 5, severe headache or migraine. Okay, severe headache or migraine. That makes sense if you're going to have one side of the body, one side of the brain not getting enough blood supply or oxygen, then it makes sense that you would have a migraine or a headache. And then it kind of doesn't make sense, which is another kind of topic because, we actually don't have pain receptors in the brain. So what you're experiencing during a migraine or a headache actually isn't in the brain. That's a whole nother conversation. All right, so severe migraine or headache, okay? Number 6, nausea or vomiting. All of a sudden you feel nauseated, you feel like you got to vomit. That could be a sign and symptom as well too. We do have an area of the brain that is greatly, when it's affected, it will cause you to be nauseated, okay? As a matter of fact, we have a medication called Zofran, and the Zofran affects a part of the brain, okay, to get rid of the nausea and vomiting, okay? The other thing that could be a sign as well, in addition to the nausea and vomiting, could be brief fainting. You could pass out. I mean, all of a sudden you pass out, no reason. Haven't been exercising, didn't overexert yourself. You're not dehydrated, but you all of a sudden just blink out. Okay, and that makes sense. You're not getting oxygen to a certain part of the brain, which feeds the brain, and all of a sudden the brain just shuts down for a moment. Sort of like your computer rebooting. Okay, and you pass out. Okay, so if all of a sudden you're passing out for no reason, it could possibly be a sign that you're having a stroke. Okay. Number 8, a rapid change in your personality or mood. If you notice that, let's say for instance, it's your mother, your father, somebody you love, your husband, your wife, and you know them to always be a nice, kind, patient person, and then all of a sudden they're aggressive, they're angry, they're overly emotional when their personality says that they're not a very emotional person. This could also be a sign and symptom as well too. Now, those are the 8 signs. The 8 signs and symptoms or signs that you could possibly be having a stroke. And what's important to know about this is that look for these in any combination, because nausea and vomiting by itself could be just simply something you ate. But if you start to see these in combinations, 2 to 3 of these different signs, and you know that you have some of the risk factors like, a blood disorder like lupus or sickle cell, high blood pressure, you take birth control, you're on birth thinners, you have an unhealthy lifestyle, these are the things that add up very quickly to say, okay, if it's not me, and I'm watching this with my mother, my father, or somebody I care about, and I see that they got they complain of blurriness in one eye. They then feel dizziness and lose coordination. They have a severe migraine, or they have slurred speech, or one side of their face starts to droop. Again, these combination of things are telling you that the person I love is in trouble. Or if it's you, I'm in trouble. And I need to either dial 911 or get medical attention very quickly. Okay. Now I give people this, what I call the fast track. Okay. So FAST. Okay. F standing for the face. You look at the face. Okay. So if you think this is possibly a sign of a stroke, look at the face. Is there any unevenness? Okay. The next thing is the arms. Have them do an arm test where you have them raise their arms up. Okay. And if one arm starts to go down like this slowly, that's a sign, possible sign and symptom. Okay. S, speech. You'll notice the slurred speech. And the test that you can do is have them repeat a very simple sentence. I am Dr. Bobby. Can you repeat that for me? Or ask them a simple question. Who is the current president? What's your birthday? If they can't answer that, it's probably a good sign that you need to now we're on time now, you need to call for medical attention immediately. Okay, so I hope that this has been helpful. Quite often we're in these situations where, especially for people who don't like going to the doctor, we always are thinking to ourselves, the last thing I want to do is go to the doctor. And especially if it's a migraine and I just had a brief period where I felt confused. You think to yourself, well, maybe I need to take my multivitamin or something like that. And we pacify it very quickly. But you could be having a mini stroke that you do not know about. And then it could lead to that major stroke that leads to a lot of not only dysfunction in the body, but potentially even losing your life. Okay, so use this for yourself. Use this at home with the people you love because, as I said before, every 40 seconds, somebody is having a stroke. As a matter of fact, we've been on this video for 21 minutes now. So at least, somewhere in the neighborhood between 21 to 28 people have had a stroke, okay, during this video. So I hope this is helpful. I hope this allows you to kind of act quickly so that you can possibly save somebody's life. Until the next time, peace and blessings and Godspeed.